All right. Hello and welcome, everybody, to the next episode of the Team Next Level Coaches Roundtable. We've got a special one here for you today, but as always, I'm joined by my three wonderful co-hosts, James, Marilyn, and Rich. What's up, guys?
Hello.
What's up?
Hello.
And quick poll to our listeners. We want to try to test out a new name. Let us know in the comments or wherever you reach out to us about the thought about a quad pod as our new podcast name.
We've
Next
got to be
level
able.
quad pod.
I'm going to be the first comment.
Let us know. It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Also, something in the comments. Last episode, if anybody comments with the exact time where Marilyn shushed Rich, we're gonna get you a free gel. We're gonna mail you a Power Bar gel because it was wonderful. It was he started talking, you were just like shush, and then moved on. It was absolutely wonderful.
And he actually shushed.
Of course.
I mean,
So everybody, we've got a really exciting episode. This one's been in the works for a couple of weeks now. We are joined by Aaron Birch. So if anybody has done triathlon in the tri-state area in the last 4, 5, 6 years, you probably know Aaron because he beat you by a lot of time. Aaron, thanks for coming on the pod. We're happy to have you.
Oh, no problem. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming on the quad pod.
It's amazing. You should all hear James's first try with this new title, which was James. What was that?
Tripod plus one.
So quad pod's an improvement over tripod plus one. So Aaron, sorry about that. But can you give us a little bit of background on you? I guess how'd you get into triathlon? What was that like?
I'll go way back for you, right? So did nothing with endurance sports growing up, right? I was a high school tennis player. My parents put a tennis racket in my hand when I was 5, 6 years old, right? And was mainly what I played growing up. As a kid, it was a little bit of everything. I actually tried out for track my freshman year of high school. I made it about a week. I realized I hated running and never went back. I tell a funny story too. When I did play tennis, to give you an idea of how much I didn't like running, for everyday practice, right? You'd show up a little bit early. Everyone would run a lap or two around the track, right? At the time, seemed like a long distance, right? About a half a mile. I would intentionally show up late to practice, so I didn't have to do that. So we can go right onto the court. So, but again, I didn't do much, right, in terms of endurance sports growing up. I would say it was shortly after, maybe in college, right?
Did you grow up around here?
I did. I grew up in Park Ridge,
Okay.
right? From the time I was 6, I was in Park Ridge. Went to Park Ridge High School. And then went to Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, right? So always New Jersey about my whole life. And when I got into school, I got a little bit into weightlifting and stuff because I was a smaller kid growing up, right? And it's probably tail end of college, right? Maybe shortly thereafter, I got into running and, distance, right? For something to stay active and something to be, I always had a competitive spirit, right? Growing up, I wanted to do something active. So started running a lot, right? Maybe, 6 days a week and really liked it. And then two of my aunts and my uncle were doing a Ironman up in Canada, Mont Tremblant Ironman. And probably 2 months before their race, they asked me and my cousin, would you like to try something fun? Right. And I'm always going to say, I'm not going to say no. And they had a funny definition of fun, right? At the time I thought, they said, how'd you like to do a triathlon? And it was the Lake George Tri, which a lot of people here are familiar with, right? Popular race in upstate New York. And I had never swam before, right? I had never gotten on a bike before, right? Other than being a kid, right? You know what I mean? With with training wheels on, but I always loved running, right? After college, right?
What was it from track in high school that you were like, to college that made you fall in love with it? You think just not having a coach yell down your throat, or?
I don't know. I didn't even make it that far to have a coach yell at me. You know what I mean? Right? Like it was, I don't know. Everyone would tell you it was, when we get through the whole story, right, of, the progression of this, everyone was shocked, right? I was a pretty lazy kid, right? I did the bare minimum. I mean, even in school, right? Like I, always did the bare minimum, right? You could tell it from practice, right? I wasn't motivated, right? Anything like that, right? And I honestly couldn't put a finger on what it was, right? It didn't give it a chance what it was. I really don't know,
Mhm.
right? What caused that, trigger to go off. But again, they said, you want to do something? It was an Olympic distance try. And I said, sure, why not? Right. I probably got on a bike 3 times before the race. Right. I swam a couple times. Right. Open water swimming was terrifying for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and even as I progressed through the years, right, it was something I always struggled with, which I'm sure we can go into a little bit more as we go through the events. But for some reason, right, I did that race up there. Right. It was a complete, I didn't know what I was doing, right? I had no idea what I was doing.
Common for most people, right?
That's sounds about right.
Didn't have a clue, but something I really liked it, right? I had a really enjoyed myself, and I think the idea of mastering, right? I use that term very, loosely. 3 sports, right, as opposed to just running. Really, for some reason it caught on with me. So I did that race, and then I signed up for a couple more late that year, right?
Any idea what year this is? Like 15?
2014 or 2015,
Okay.
something right around there.
Okay.
Right, it was my first year of ever doing a triathlon.
Okay. And did you come in like last, middle, first? How did you do?
I did pretty. I mean, I got decently well for someone. I think it was always because I was always gifted running, right? For some reason, even though I didn't do it much, right? Running came easier to me than everything else. And I think as a triathlete, you're at an advantage being a strong runner, right? And I think most people would tell you that, right? Is when you excel at running, it really helps. But middle of the pack, right? And I said, and I realized, I think pretty quickly that it was something that I was decent at, right? And then went from there. But that said, I could thank my aunt and uncle, 2 of my aunts and my uncle for it, right? I didn't know what triathlon was at the time. I couldn't tell you what sports were involved, but they asked me to do that one, and for some reason it caught on. And years and years later,
that's awesome.
Here we are.
How old were you said?
I was probably, what was I? Born 88, so 26-ish, something like that. If I guess 25, 26 when I started this. So,
and that first race, do you remember? Was it just a all around happy experience? Like you finished across the line, you're later, or was there suffering? And
there was suffering. There's no doubt. There was always suffering. But I said, particularly like again, once I get to the run, and this went through my entire career, right? Once I got to the run, I was in a great place, right? I'm always enjoying myself on the run, right? But the swim particularly, right, was not enjoyable, right? I was not comfortable, right? I said that whole, and I tell anyone that asks me advice for their first one and stuff like that is always get yourself in open water before, your first race, because it's a very different experience. You're getting bodied in the water, right? Like, and you people grab hold, right? You get kicked and all that stuff, and it's very, unnerving, right, in the water. So that was a real struggle for me, right? And then the bike felt like forever. It was torture, right? Like I said, the bike I didn't love either, right? But as soon as I got on that run, I was happy, and finished it up. And the first thought when I finished was not, that sucked. It was, when can I do another one? Right? Like, when can I do another one? And then I went home and I searched a couple more for later that year, right, to get into. I think there was the Westchester one. There was another one up in Newburgh that year, if I remember correctly. So a couple smaller races, and just fell in love with the sport.
So Rich, our risk analyst, would tell you should wait at least 24 or 48 hours.
48.
You just don't go into your first instinct about something.
So right after the race, he's like, don't trust whatever you're
A little
feeling.
too impulsive that was.
Yeah, don't be impulsive. Right.
But I'm like you. It's like,
Yeah,
I
the rest
cross
of
that
us are like
line.
that.
I'm like, all right, look, checking my phone. Where's the next race I can go?
Gotcha. And I'll tell you a story about that first race too, and I might go into some of this later about the progression, right? But I remember that race, right? The guy that won, maybe it was one of the guys finished up front, the Team USA jerseys, right?
Yeah.
And I've always been, my dad was a military guy, I was a helicopter pilot, right? I've always been very, patriotic person, right? And I saw someone wearing that Team USA jersey with their last name on it. And I remember asking questions, right? Like, how do I get that,
Yeah.
right? And I think that was one of the things too that helped push me, right? It's like, I want that, right? And I learned the process, right, about nationals, all that stuff, going to worlds, all that whole adventure you have to go through to get that. But that really motivated me too, because I'm like, I would love to get one of those. At the time, I had no idea like whether I could ever do that, but that was something that I always wanted when I saw my first race.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
So what is that? I mean, I don't know the process. What do you have to do?
So a couple steps in there, right? So those are anytime you qualify for worlds, right, you can get one of those jerseys, right? So how they do it is, and I hope it's still the same today, right? As opposed to, I've been out of the sport a year now, so I'm thinking most of it's still the same. But every USAT sanctioned race, they take the top 10% in every age group qualifies you for nationals, right? And they have the nationals race once a year, right? I did it a couple times in Omaha and then once in Cleveland, maybe twice in Cleveland. I don't remember. But so the top 10% from any local race that's sanctioned, right, qualifies you for nationals. And then they take, I believe it was the top 18 people from every age group qualifies you for the age group worlds, wherever it is. So as soon as you qualify for worlds, you're able to get one of those jerseys.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So you made that progression pretty quick.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. So I'll just, whether it was 2014 or 2015, year one, right? I did it. I realized this is fun, right? I can do this. I actually tore my meniscus later that year, right? I think I qualified in my first or second race for nationals. And again, you get this email and I had no idea what this meant, right? Like this is all still so new to me, right? You get an email, you qualify for nationals. I'm like, really? Right?
Yeah.
I still don't know what I'm doing, right? I'm not that good at this. Like, how is that possible?
Clearly you were.
So I tore my meniscus that year and then I was out for many months, right? And I didn't think I was ready to go do something like that. So I actually turned it down my first year, right? I didn't go. The following year, right, a bunch of training, right? I was able to qualify again the next year with some local races, whether it was Lake George or Westchester or something. So it was I guess that would be year 2 I qualified. Year 3, I guess, doing the sport, I went to
nationals.
The third season of doing the sport, I went to nationals, I think it was. And then I remember being, so at that point, I'm starting to look into all the rules, right? How you get that, right? And I came up, I think I was like 21st my first year or something like that. So right on the cusp.
On the edge.
That hurt, right?
Yeah.
Like I wanted that really bad, right? That was my goal going there.
That had to give you drive for the next season, though.
It definitely gave me drive for the next season, right? And at that point, I think that right after my first nationals was when I decided to get a full-time coach, right? To help me. Because again, still at that point, really, you're winging it, right? Like I don't know the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So I had one coach my entire career, right? Through amateur, through, the age group stuff, all through pro. She was awesome, helped me a lot along the way. So I got a full-time coach at that point, right? And then the following season, so my second time doing nationals was the first time I qualified for worlds.
And you went to worlds twice, right?
I went, yes, twice. Once in some of the coolest experiences of my life.
Yeah,
right?
I wanted to ask you about that because it's the two names that, when you type in your name and they come up on World Triathlon, they show the two spots and I'm like, oh, those sound like really cool places to go race.
Yeah, and again, it was, I'll tell a couple stories about that. So the first time was in Gold Coast, Australia, right?
Wow.
That was
cool.
a phenomenal trip. And the following year was in, pronounce this wrong, Lausanne, Switzerland. Another beautiful, beautiful place to race. But I still think that first Worlds, right, in Australia was probably my coolest triathlon memory,
experience,
right?
period, right?
It was,
they do like a whole parade of nations, right? And like it's a whole thing.
It was, they do a parade of nations, right? It was just so cool going out, right? You go out with some of your other Team USA, teammates, right? You see like, whether it's the Australian national team, right? Or, Canada, whoever it is out there, working out together, right? It was cool, right? Everything there was, really, everything was centered around the race, right? For that weekend. So I had a great time, right? My dad flew my entire family out, right, to watch, to support me for my first one. So I'll tell you a crazy story about that race though is I raced with a disc on my bike, a rear wheel, right? Full disc. And as some know, it can get a little treacherous when it gets windy out with something like that. And only wheel I had there. And the night before the race, I'm going to sleep. It's 8:00. We get an email from the race. You cannot use disc wheels. They banned them for the race.
Wow.
So you can imagine the panic that everyone has.
Yeah,
everyone's staying in the same hotel, right? They have like a Team USA hotel, right? Most people stay at. Everyone's in the lobby. What can we do, right? I didn't think I was gonna be able to race at that point, right? And I'm like, my family flew all the way out here for me to not be allowed to race would be awful. But I'll give credit. USA Triathlon did a great job, right? Coordinating, because that weekend they have different races, right? I think like the sprint race is one day, right? And then they have the Olympic distance race another day. There's a whole bunch of races over the course of, I think it starts like Thursday, right? So over 4 days. They got volunteers from the sprint race to give up their wheels.
That's
for
awesome.
people in the Olympic distance race. So it saved a lot of people. But again, I felt bad because you had a bunch of countries that didn't have communication like that. that they didn't even know until the morning of that they're not.
Can you imagine flying halfway across the world and then being like, whoop.
You had to go unicycle mode or something.
I can't even explain the panic, right, that was going on at the time, right? So whoever that guy is that let me have his wheel, if he's ever listening to this, right?
Yeah.
I owe you big time.
If you somehow are listening, comment, let us know.
He is.
We're just going to get randoms. Like, I lent him my wheel. No, it was me.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you mentioned getting a coach at that point. What was kind of the big change in your training when you went from doing it yourself to letting a coach take care of all the programming and stuff? Any like
the
big
structure,
things? Yeah.
The structure, right? And I always needed that, right? I've always, really wanted like a really detailed program, right? So again, I didn't know how to break up how many times a week should I be running, how many to biking, swimming. I really didn't know at that point, right? And for me, the swim being my weakness, right? Having a structured swim program, right? I would just go jump in the water and swim some laps, right? Like drills, all that stuff, right? Interval work in the pool. I knew nothing about any of this, right? So I just think that I love the structure of this is what you should do, is laid out every week exactly what I should be doing, right? You start doing, power training on the bike, right? As opposed to just, I'm going to go ride 2 hours at a,
sure,
just as hard as I can go for 2 hours, as opposed to having some structure to it. So that was the biggest change, right? And technique help in the pool, right, was a big thing, right? Because as someone that's not a swimmer, right, really could use a lot of help there. So that was the biggest change, right? Was just the structure to it, and not just doing everything, by the seat of my pants, right? Just trying to figure it out on my own.
Did you have your coach? Was she in person or was she remote?
She was. So I said, shout out Amy Maxwell, right? If she's listening to this, right? It said, amazing coach. She's the coach for the West Point triathlon team, actually. So It's actually a funny story. She was at Lifetime, right, for a while. We had been introduced there when my aunt and uncle were doing that Ironman, right? Because they had some triathlon program there at the time that doesn't exist anymore. But I had met her very briefly. And then we connected after my first nationals, right? She had seen, right, and asked if I was interested in coaching, right? And that's when we started working together.
Oh, nice.
And your question, sorry, she was in person. So when I was here, it was in person, right? We got to see each other sometimes, right? And then when I went out to San Diego, right, it was obviously all virtual, right? Getting guidance. When I was home, we would see each other, swim together sometimes for some in-person sessions. But most of my career, I was probably, it was remote.
Okay.
That's
Someone's
my phone.
buzzing.
Is that you, Marilyn? That's
Yeah,
okay.
it's
Is that all right?
good.
Do you need to take it?
Nope.
Okay.
It's all good.
So one of we had Dr. John Mendenhall on the show while was one of our first ones, and I feel like anytime I was on John's table, he always kind of had a story about you. Yeah. So we reached out to him and said, like, we're having Aaron on. Can you share some things? And he really didn't come up with too much. He did just say he needs to ask you about how he won the PV try against you a couple of years ago.
Of course,
one of the most prestigious races
Thanks, John.
in Bergen County.
Appreciate it, John. Yeah, so let me go back. I'll tell you this story too. But I said John and I I think we got introduced. It was to him and Jerry, right? I used to go to in Park Ridge. They had a Tuesday night interval run. And that's the first time I remember meeting those two. Okay. And I always remember, with local races, you see a lot of the same names, right? All the time. And I always remember seeing his name, right? Because he was a little bit younger than me, but we're always mostly in the same age group, right? And I always remember seeing him kill the swim, right? Like for some reason, I would always be infatuated with the swim times because I just wasn't good at it, right?
Yeah.
So
he was probably looking at your run times thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's where we first met, right? I believe. And then I said we raced a lot together, became good friends. We were roommates together for a while, right? So we always joked, right, that he would we would go and swim together, and he would push me in the water, and then we'd go out and run together, and I would push him for the run. So we became close, right, good friends over the years. But John's favorite memory of us racing together was the PV try. I remember doing that sprint race right here, local, right? So everybody, and he was a little bit ahead of me at the time, like he was, right? And then I generally run him down, right? Was how it normally went, and I missed a turn and ran about a half a mile in the wrong direction before I realized I was going the wrong direction when I didn't see anybody.
Hillsdale Ave, you end up at a
that's right by
gas station.
Is that Hillsdale?
Yeah,
is that Hillsdale Ave? It's
Hillsdale.
the one right where is it Stony Brook, right? Runs, or is it Cedar Lane? I don't know if it's still Cedar Lane, right?
Okay. Uh-huh.
But up that way, right? I guess I was supposed to make a right, and there was markings on the grounds. They claim. And I ran right by, and I got to a gas station. I eventually said something, have you seen anyone coming this way? And they said, no, I think you're lost. So I turned around, I ran back. And turns out there was a guy, I don't know if it was a police officer or not, someone standing on the corner that I was supposed to turn at and didn't say anything to me.
Oh
So you could have met, I was pissed, right? I'm competitive, right? And I eventually said, I'm not finishing this race. I walked back. I expressed my displeasure to the race director because I wasn't happy because again, John and I were friendly but competitive, right? Like, and I didn't like losing, right?
Yeah.
So I made a comment. He's like, there's markings on the ground. So I went back and there was probably a 2-inch arrow on the ground that says to turn, right? That I did miss. And again, the thing in the sport is you're supposed to know the course. It's no one's fault but my own, right? I know that, but I went off course, and John never let me hear the end of it. That's for sure.
What if we told you John paid that policeman off?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Was that the only time you went off course?
Gotta think, but yes, that is the only time in my career that I went off course. So now I'm starting to think maybe it was this was a setup, right? I said, you guys know everybody around here, so
When the stakes were highest.
Right.
So much riding on the line there. Yeah, bragging rights. So then, I mean, we got a ton of questions, but you kind of succeed at almost every level you tried, right? Like you start out and just kind of have some success off the bat, make nationals, do well there, go to Worlds. I mean, you did well at Worlds, right? Top 10 in your age group, and
both times I was top 10 in my age group.
which I
at
mean,
Worlds.
that's wild.
Yeah.
When does the idea of going pro enter your head, or had it always been there?
No, it hadn't. I said it was always like baby steps, right?
Yeah.
At least in my mind, right? Like at first, like you said, it was nationals, right? It says, and I was, all right, what's next, right? Worlds is next, right? And then it became very important. Like I just want to do well at Worlds, right?
Yeah.
That was important. And I was kind of at a point where like, what's next, right?
Right.
Do I continue to just, as an amateur, right? That's about what you can do, right? Do I continue to just try to go to Worlds every year? And I loved it, right? Like I said, going to those, wearing that Team USA jersey, right? Going there and going to some really cool places was a lot of fun, but talking to my coach, and it's kind of like, what's the next step in the progression? And it's earning your pro card, right?
Mhm.
So then that became, right, the obsession next.
Can you
right,
walk us
was-
through what that takes and how that happens?
Yeah,
'Cause I
sure.
think that's probably, most people don't have any clue. You don't just write a letter and say, can I be a pro?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different criteria, right? I think there's probably 5 or 6 different ways. I know of a few of them that were most likely for me, right? So they have automatic immediate qualifiers, right? I think it was top 5 overall at nationals, right? So not just your age group. It was the top 5 people overall at nationals. You automatically, right, would qualify for your pro card. Or top 10 overall at Worlds was another way, right, that you went immediately. The way I did it was USAT has this ranking system. It's some like crazy calculation
It's
of
insane.
Outputs a number, right? That I don't think anyone really knows how they calculate it, right? But they set a threshold every year, right? And I think it's at the time at least, it was you had to have 2 qualifying scores over a certain number, right? And it had to be in the same calendar year, right? So I believe, I'm trying to get the timing right here too, because I actually qualified for my pro card right when COVID started, right? So my last race before COVID was December of 2019, right? When I was living out in California, it was the Indian Wells 70.3 is when I qualified.
And you
right?
did great there, right? Like top 20 something overall.
I think it was 6th overall.
6th overall?
I think something like that. Maybe 8th overall, something like that. So that was how I did it. And I think now if I do the timing right, I think I had 1 score good enough in 2018, right? But then again, you lose that, right? Because you have to do it twice in a year. So I went into 2019, again, I think that the top 5 at nationals or top 10 at Worlds at the time, right, was a stretch for me. So I focused on, can I get 2 scores of whatever that number was at the time, right? And I think the first one I did it was at, I want to say that it was at Worlds in Switzerland that year was the first time I got that score. So that was one, right? I think that's in the August, September timeframe. So now I'm like, I think I had only 1 race left in the year at that point, right? And it was the Indian Wells 70.3. So I put, again, a lot of pressure on me. I'm like, I really need to do well, right? And so I went out there, right? Again, I think I finished 6, 7, something like that overall. And I know I did well, but again, you don't know how this is calculated. So you really don't know. I remember I I checked the computer every day after that, right? I like religious. I got nothing done at work, right? So every day I was on there. I got to the point where I called USA Triathlon, like, when are these going to be posted? Because it had gotten into like January already, before they hadn't posted anything. So it turns out they say it's going to be another couple days. I went on, right? I'm holding my breath as I scroll through it, and I was able to get that second score based on that race. Okay. And I said that's what the 2 scores is what did it for me to earn my pro card.
And was it something that like your coach was taking your lead on? This is what I want to do, or is it something that you kind of got pushed into or talked out of a little bit before thinking about those 2 races? What was your mindset? No, I don't think so.
I think it was again everything with her and I was a collaboration, right? We talked through it, right? What are the benefits of continuing to race as an amateur, right? Maybe getting a little more experience before you go pro, because I tell you, it's a whole different world once you start racing in the pro field, right? It's very different. I weighed it back and forth, right? What I wanted to do, and she would have been supportive of whatever I think I decided, right, that I wanted to do. Again, did I know how different the pro world was at the time? Right? No, right? It's very different. But the thought of being able to say that I accomplished something that I never thought I'd be able to accomplish, right? And I said anyone that knew me when I was telling you those stories about skipping practice at tennis, right? If they would have told you that I'd be disciplined enough to become pro in any sport, they would say you're out of your mind, right? Like it just was not in the cards at the time, right? So.
It's impressive.
The thought of, being a professional athlete in any sport, right? It's, it's not as glamorous as, be it in the NFL or NBA, right? But to accomplish something like that and, be at the top part of the sport, right, was something I liked the idea of, and I wanted to try my hand because I'm a big believer and you're not going to be your best until you compete against the best, right? Mm-hmm. So I knew the best in the world were racing there. So I'm like, I'll go try my hand at it. Right. Unfortunately, I had to wait a whole year to do it. Right. Because 2020 was a wash. Right. Which was that was agonizing. Right.
I can imagine.
It was something like a year and a half in between races. Right. By the time I was able to race again. But I wanted to compete against the best and see what I was able to do. Right. Because I don't know. I just think that would bring out the best in me. So
what are the benefits of staying amateur? What do you think?
Again, I mean, I think anyone you're going to perform better, right? If you're doing just amateur races, if you're the person that wants to, you're in it just to win, right? And everyone loves winning. Don't get me wrong, I do too, right? But if you just want to stay an amateur and race against amateurs, right, and just win, and I think it's also, I never really dove into sponsorships and stuff like that, right? Because, I don't know why, right? But I never dug into it. But I believe if you're an amateur, and I could be wrong on this, but you're, a high level amateur, right, versus a middle to lower end pro, right, you have more visibility, right? You're more likely to get some, again, I don't think you're getting nothing like the pros are getting, but free stuff, right? What they're going to give you in sponsorships, right? So I would say that's probably one benefit is like the, what you can get in terms of sponsorship. Winning some of these non-pro races, right, is always fun. So I would say that's why a lot of people do it, would be my guess, right? Why they stay there instead of going up to the pro field.
So you got your pro card now, and then walk us through like what changed. How did everything training wise?
Yeah, that's a lot of what changed. Let's start with training. Like, did you feel a bigger pressure now on yourself to focus on triathlon? Were you still holding a 40-hour a week job at this point?
The whole time, yeah. I'm doing 40 hours a week, right? So not a lot changed, to be honest, in my training, right? I'm an all-in type person, right? So even from the time, maybe not the very beginning, right? But even the last few years racing amateur, right? Like I didn't miss workouts unless it was something I absolutely was, whether I was hurt and I absolutely physically couldn't do it, or something was, really kept me from doing it, right? So in terms of the training, right, not a lot. I'd say more the pressure and all that stuff, right? And I don't know how to explain it. I did a better job taking care of my body, right? I think I started incorporating, right, and I think that just comes with age too. That has nothing to do with racing amateur or pro, right? But I learned the importance of, of nutrition. I started studying the importance of nutrition and how I want to fuel myself, and recovery, right, with things like Normatec boots and, the Hypervolt and things like that to make my body feel better, right? Because over the years, you're just adding miles to your body, right? And I just noticed every year I was starting to be a little bit more uncomfortable, right? Like, it was taking its toll. So I shouldn't feel like this at whatever I was at the time, 32, 31. Yeah. So I started really learning how to take care of myself more than anything. But in terms of the training itself, right, it was still about the same. I might have, added, a little bit more, right, in terms of I would, it was such a crazy schedule, right? I'm up in the morning, right? Probably swimming in the morning, right? And then I would always do a workout after work, but I would try to squeeze in a run randomly during lunch or something like that. And I'm out in San Diego where it's nice all the time. So I'd run right out of the office, right?
Had you moved to San Diego prior to getting your pro card? Or
yes, I moved to San Diego. I was out there for about a year, right? So it was around Thanksgiving of 2018. So I was out there for about a year before I had gotten my.
Was that to focus on tri? And yeah,
partially, yeah. I wasn't. That was part of it, right?
Yeah.
Was to focus on that. Be somewhere I can be year round outside, right? Which is, and it's a great place for triathlon, San Diego, right? Because you can imagine.
I think it's a great place for a lot of things.
It is a great place for a lot of things. But part of it, I took a job within the same company out there, right? I just needed something new, but a lot of it was around the triathlon and being able to really focus on my training out there, right? And got involved with some, again, really strong athletes out there, right? Riding out there is very different than here, right? In terms of the strength of the group, so you can really push yourself, right? Found a couple people to swim with, right? We found a lot of triathletes out there, right? Again, most of my training still myself. Was a believer, and that's what worked best for me, right, with the structure. But certainly was a big reason, or part of the reason I moved out to San Diego was the triathlon aspect.
Awesome.
So even if you didn't have a full-time job, do you think you would have still trained alone, or you would have been more of a squad training person?
I think if I didn't have to work, and the thought crossed my mind many times, right, to give up my job and just see what I could do, right? Because again, I look at it like I was training probably in terms of, I'm not talking just the hours of swim, bike, run, right? 20-ish hours, right, a week. Maybe it's the low 20s, right?
But all the time, or like leading into a race, there had to be more. Right.
Or leading in, you would taper down a little bit leading into a race. But the most I was doing during a training season, was 20, 25 hours of just the swim, bike, run every week, right? You add on the hours of, the recovery and all that stuff, the stretching that I started doing, and you get more than that. But the most, that's really what I could physically get into a week with working, right? And I look at some of the other guys, right, that are, again, my dream was to give up my job, right, and train 40 hours a week, right, 50 hours a week. Like, I loved it, right? Like, that's what I wanted to do. If I had my way and I had an income and I was able to do that, I 100% would have done that. But I wasn't in the position to do that, right? And I said, it's unfortunately, right, I say, is you can get to that level, and unless you're still even the tippy top of the pros, right, you still got to have something, right? Like,
yeah, we talked about that. Was it last week? We kind of went over stuff, and that was kind of the consensus we came to, and we really were waiting to ask you, but like, how good would you have to be? Not you specifically, anybody have to be to just say, okay, training and racing, and that's it. And that's all. My manager will take care of my sponsorship deals, but everything else is like, how you'd have to be winning most of your races, probably. You'd have to be one of those names that everybody knows.
Yeah, I said, I think so, right?
Yeah.
I said, and again, even there's a lot of very good athletes out there, right? That are it's a struggle, right? It really is a struggle. And again, to me, it's everything's a balance, right? As if, there's a certain lifestyle that I wanted to have, right? That I wasn't going to make what I wanted to make in triathlon to do that, right? So I always, I'm very happy with my career, right? I like what I do, right? I wasn't willing to give that up, right? Trust me, it crossed my mind, like I mentioned, but I wasn't willing to give up my career, right? With that steady, stable income, right? As opposed to a sport where most of the time you have to perform to make anything. And even then, right? You look at Ironman's cut back on what they're paying people and all that stuff, right? It's just it's a very difficult, it's unfortunate, but it's a very difficult sport to make a living in, right?
Yeah.
And I wish it wasn't the case, but that's just unfortunately the way it is.
Yeah.
We also had another question that ran around the table for the coaches, and that was around strength training. And we want, and maybe we want to get your take, because you said you were doing swim, bike, run, and then stretching and hypervolt and boots and all that stuff. And if we had to ask you, would you incorporate strength training as a must?
Absolute must, right? And I think that's something I learned later, right? I felt better when I did. There's a lot of benefits, right? And I think my problem was, right, is I was always so worried about my weight too, right? Because everyone wants to talk about how, your body weight, right? And every pound you gain, right? Particularly for the bike and the run, right? You think it slows you down, but I think I got at times, I started, didn't have the muscle mass and things I needed that I would get from strength training in order to be able to perform, right? And I picked that up later in my career where I would want to incorporate strength training 2-3 times a week because I felt so much stronger, right? I think it helped me a ton on the bike more than anything. But I would say it's an absolute must, right? And I said one of my biggest things is I wish I would have done it longer, right? And it was something I really picked up towards the very tail end of my racing, right? Even like the last, just racing my pro season, right?
Mhm.
Like I realized that, but I would put it as a absolute must for
Thank you for that
training.
answer. Appreciate it.
So you talked a little bit about what changed most, and you said it was the pressure. What sort of pressure? Where was it coming from yourself, from your coaches, from competitors? But talk about that.
No,
a little
I think
more.
it's all I'd put on myself, right? I said I never felt any pressure from my coach, from family, from anything, any friends to perform, right? It was just pressure I put on myself, right? It was, and again, it just being very open about it, right? Just wasn't as fun, right? Like, and it's part of the reason I raced. Again, we'll get this. I raced one pro season, and then as that season went on, I realized, right, like I just wasn't enjoying the sport, right? And the promise I made to myself when I started this whole thing, right? I was never doing it to make a living. I was never doing it for like glory, right, or anything like that. It was I had a passion for the sport. I loved triathlon. I loved swimming, biking, and running, right? More than anything, right? And I dedicated my life to it for 7-8 years, whatever it was, right? But the promise I made is the second it started to feel like a job or it wasn't enjoyable was when I would give it up, right? And it was mostly the pressure I put on myself, right? And I wasn't performing to the level that I wanted to perform anymore, right? Like it's, like I mentioned before, why do people stay in the amateur field, right? You're winning races, you're doing well, right? And then you go to the pro field and you really get put in your place, right? Like these are now the absolute best guys in the world. I'll tell a story. My first ever pro race, right, was the Texas 70.3 in Galveston. And so it's a point-to-point swim, right? So everyone's getting ready in transition.
It's not an ocean swim, is it?
It's in the Gulf, I think. So it's not, what's it called? It's like the bay
like the
side,
bay?
right? Yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not like open ocean.
I went to
right?
college
it's
in
still
Galveston.
But it's still ocean, right? But I think it's just
Yeah,
like
it's probably
in the
saltwater,
bay.
but
yeah.
yeah.
So they call us up. We walk whatever it is, half a mile, 3/4 of a mile up to the start of the swim, right? Everyone's up there stretching, getting ready, and they say, "All right, pro males to the water," right? And I look to my right, and Lionel Sanders is walking right next to
Oh,
me,
man.
and I'm just like, "Well, this is pretty cool at the
Yeah.
same time, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the guy everybody knows, right?" And
You're like starstruck.
it was
Yeah.
fun, right? I said it's just someone you recognize, but I was just again I don't know if it was just losing the fun in it, right? Whether it was my body starting to hurt a little bit, more than I wanted it to, whether it was just getting my butt kicked, every time I went out there, right? And, starting to feel like that I reached about as high as I was going to go, right? Unless I quit my job, right? And committed more hours to it, right? I think I just reached as high as I was going to go, right? And I didn't think there was anywhere to go from there, right? Again, the fact that I was, I didn't say getting destroyed, right? But I said I didn't have a chance, right? Like every other race as an amateur, any race I went into, I knew I had a chance.
Okay.
Right.
Mhm.
And at this point I knew my day could go as well as it possibly could go. I'm not winning the race. I'm not finishing in the top 3 at the race. Right. And I'm talking the bigger races. I was able to do I was the White Lake 70.3, right, in a smaller pro field, finished second, right, which I was proud of, right? It was one of my best moments in my racing pro, but in the bigger races, which is most of what you're doing in Ironman, like I didn't stand a chance, right? So I think that took its toll, right? In combination with just my body breaking down a little bit, right? And then just mentally, it just wasn't fun anymore. And another thing, right, on a personal note, I was committing my life, right? Like I said, for 7-8 years, right? And I'm 30. What was I? I was 33 when I retired, right, last year, and there's other things I want in life, right? Like I eventually decided I want to move back closer to family, right? Like I want a family of my own, right? And relationships were hard, right? When you're racing like that, right? Everything's harder because you're committing so much time. Like my life was working my full-time job and training. So there were other things that I wanted in life, right? And I didn't think I would be able to have that, right? If I continued at this level, right? With this amount of commitment. And again, at that point, I think about, right, well, should I go back to racing amateur, right? You could do that, right? But my nature is if I'm racing, I'm going to be as good, everything in my power to be as good as I could possibly do, as well as I can possibly do. So I decided best for me was just to cut it off altogether. It was a strange feeling, right?
Sure.
After that amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was a very strange feeling. But I think back to your original question, I kind of got a little sidetracked there, but it was mostly the pressure I put on myself more than anything, right? To perform and do well.
So is it the race that's different or the pressure that's different between amateur and pro?
No, the race is different too, right? Because there's a lot more strategy involved, right? I think like in the amateur world, right, you really don't even know who you're racing against,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Like everyone's in different age groups. There's staggering start times, right? You don't really know, right, who you're really racing against. You're really doing your own race. You're in your own world because you don't know where you
don't see
are,
them,
right?
yeah.
Unless you have someone like what I used to do with my dad was if he was at races, he'd be calling out, right, what place I'm in, how far back. But generally, you don't know. You're just doing the best you possibly can. The pro field it's a lot more strategic, right? I said everything from the swim, right? Guys go crazy at the start of the swim because they want to break, they want to pull away, right?
Mhm.
It's, again, a weaker swimmer can hang on your feet for a while, right? But if they go all out and drop you, you're done, right? So they're trying to drop as many people as they can, then get into a groove in the swim. And then same thing on the bike, right? You'll get surges on the bike, right? You need to be very strategic, right? And then even in the run, which is the only thing I was good enough at to be strategic, right? Is you would play these games with people, right? Like I said, that White Lake race I did, I remember coming off the bike in fourth. I could see coming off in fifth, and I could see third and fourth close, just a little bit ahead of me, and then second was a ways out, right? And then first was I didn't even see, but I caught third and fourth pretty quick and got into third, and then I used up a lot of energy getting to second, right? And you play these games where my thought process is I either have to run by him so fast that I break his spirits, right? Or run right behind him, right? Make him push himself harder than he wants to go, right? In order to exhaust him and then go, right? So there's a lot of mind games in it, right? So in a scenario like that, right, I decided I'm going to stay on his heels because I needed to recover, right? So I stayed on his heels for about a mile. We got to the turn at halfway, and that's when I just took off as hard as I could go to try to make it. Again, this sport is so mental, right? There's so much, such a mental aspect to it. And then I took off and then far enough away that he's like, there's no chance I'm catching him, and then I can go back into a groove, right? So there's a lot of just strategic decisions, right? In all three of the disciplines that you don't see in the amateur field, right? In the amateur field, you're just doing as well as you can do, whereas you're really taking into account the people around you in the pro field.
I mean, I'm nowhere near your level of running, but I just know I never want to be in the front. Like I don't like the feeling of someone chasing me because you don't know. Like I don't know what's behind me. I'd rather have someone ahead of me and then like try to keep catching up, and then eventually catch and pass. Doesn't happen, but I'd rather mentally just feel better chasing someone than being chased.
Well, in that note, I was never far enough in front of anything, right? After swimming, right? That I'm always catching, right? That was always what I had fun doing too, right? Because I was by far, running was my strength, right? So at that point, I was most of the time running people down, right? So I enjoyed
pick
that
someone,
aspect.
and then you're like, all right, I'm going after that guy.
Yeah, and that was always my case because my thing was don't fall too far behind on the swim. Try to hold my own and gain a little bit on the bike, and then once I got to the run, that was when I was trying to move
about
my way
right.
forward.
I know we talked about the PV tribe, being upset.
Oh,
and
boy.
Oh, we're
all
going back
that
to this. We're
emotion.
going back to this, huh?
But I don't want to go back to that. I want to go back to like in the other races that you did. Did you ever get inside your head so much that you're like, this race has just gone so far away from me that I want to stop or something?
There was a couple. Yeah, there's a couple examples, right? I think so. Some that come to mind immediately, right, was that my first pro race I did in Texas, right? I actually got a flat tire about halfway through the bike, right, which is so demoralizing, right? It was my first one, right, and at that point, it's very hard, right, to stay motivated. And truth is, I don't even at that point, I don't carry anything to fix it, right?
That's what I was going to ask. Do you change it yourself, or there's
I'm willing. So I got lucky that there just happened to be a guy, it's one of the motor vehicles, right, that just supports there. It was going to fix it for me, but my thoughts are I don't even bother carrying it. If I get a flat, my race is over.
Your race is over,
right?
anyway.
So I don't carry anything to change it myself. But I happened to get lucky that race, right? That there happened to be a guy, right? Maybe a minute or two after I got the flat, right? That he was coming by. He goes, "You want me to fix that?" I said, "Sure," right? But at that point, right, I'm just like, why, right? I've lost so much time at that point, right? But and then I think to myself, right? I family come to watch this, right? And you think about all the things to finish, right? And
At this point,
I never want to quit,
You've
right?
been waiting a year and a half to do this
Yeah.
race, right?
Exactly. And I take pride in that. One thing too, I did well, other than the PV try, I finished every race that I started, right?
And what was the mental thing about that? Like, do you have something that's like your personal thing to mentally get you through the tough moments of the race?
I had early in my career, right? So I had a very weird mindset in what I would do, right? You know, mentally to get myself right, especially in the early amateur days. And I'll tell a story. My uncle had ALS and passed away many years ago. And I always think about people have it worse. And I start, when I start to suffer, and I, tell myself, stop being, a little baby about it, right? Just people have it worse than you, right? And I would think of, again, it sounds weird to a lot of people probably, right? But I would say he'd do anything, right? To be able to be doing what I'm doing, right? So, just, get in the game and let's go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I always would try to find something, right? To push me, to get me to keep going, right? So that's one example, right? Of just something that I would do, right? And I think it's a mental sport. And I think it's a lot of things, something that, I don't know. I think it's, some people have it, some people don't, right? I just think that's the way it is, right? In order to excel in this sport or just compete in this sport, you need to be very mentally strong because you're suffering for a long period of time, right? And it's very easy to quit, right? And say, I don't want to do this anymore. But I really, again, things would get hard, right? But the thought of not finishing or quitting or letting up really never really crossed my mind no matter what, right? So as I know how I would feel if I did do that, right? I'd feel worse, so.
Along the same lines, mentally, can you talk about an experience where you had something nutritionally go wrong, and how did you adjust yourself or get yourself to the finish line?
Yeah, I would say that one comes to mind again first was Nice I did one 70.3 Worlds in Nice. That was the same year that was Lausanne had the Worlds for the Olympic distance. They were actually back-to-back weeks, which is a pretty cool trip to go race in Switzerland, and then the very following weekend race in Nice. But I had a bike issue, chain issue. The chain fell off. We were climbing a hill, and I missed a shift, and the chain came off. And then I picked my bike up, turned it over, right, to fix the chain, and there goes my nutrition, right? So now I'm thinking, what now? I just lost a lot of time, right? I'm down on nutrition, right? Because I know exactly what I need and what I bring, right? Mm-hmm. And you try to conserve it, right? Like I generally brought enough that I was getting very little from the aid stations on the bike, right? I would bring enough with me that I would have, but now that changes everything, right? So that race was torture for that reason, right? Because I was on minimal nutrition through the bike, right? It was a hot day, and I took its toll later, right? It was the first time I ever crashed at the end of a run, right? Like I slowed down majorly because I had nothing left in the tank. But again, the thing about triathlon too is nothing's ever going to go perfectly as planned, right? You're always changing things in your head, right? Strategy changes and all that stuff. So I had to, again, my thing is now I have to stop. I have to get nutrition, right, from the aid stations, right, to make sure I can fuel myself, because that's the fourth discipline of triathlon that nobody wants to, or people don't talk about as much, I should say, right? And I'd argue it's just as important as the other three, because if you don't, especially especially once you get to like the 70.3 distance and longer, right? It gives a huge toll, right? Like, and if you wait until you're thirsty, or you wait until you're, dehydrated, or, lack of nutrition, it's too late at that point. But that was the one example, right? Is you try to conserve what you can, right? And you start thinking about course too, right? So I try to study the courses before I go, right? And I knew that it was a lot of climbing that race. It was like about I want to say a 10-12 mile climb, right? And then I knew, right, so I can use a lot of my nutrition here, because the second half of that you have to go down, right? So you're trying to be strategic then when you know you have limited, of what you want, right, of what you planned. So I would try to really push it then going up, not only because, right, I wanted to make up time that I just lost dropping the chain, right? And I figured I would use a lot of my nutrition there. I would use a lot of my energy, because the whole second half of that was downhill. So just try to, again, always being strategic and, right, being willing to change on the fly in the sport.
I'm also curious to get your thoughts, and I know you're a fantastic runner and always leaned into that, and that was your fun. But I feel like in the recent years, and maybe also in the past as well, but more so recently, there's a lot of talk about walk run, and people like slowing down for aid stations or walking the aid stations. What are your thoughts on that strategy to complete or even do well at a longer distance race?
I don't know. I said, I don't know enough about it, right? I said, I was not going to do that, right? I was running through the aid stations, throwing whatever I can down, right? I always thought, right? And again, I'm thinking back to my early days, right? Yeah. When I would slow down, I'd have a hard time, right? I did one marathon ever in my life, and it was before I got into triathlons, right? If I was ever to slow down at an aid station, I'd have issue especially towards the end of a race, struggle to get my legs going again, right? Was from what I remember, right? I incorporated, and again, I don't know the science behind it, right? My coach incorporated some of in the training, the run walk aspect of it, right? Again, the reasoning behind it, the logic behind it, I trusted her with my training and everything like that, which she told me to do, I was doing, right? Like I didn't question anything. So I know I did a little bit of it, but I couldn't tell you the much of the science behind whether it's good, bad, neutral, don't know.
Do you still swim, bike, run at all?
I think my last race was, when was it? October of last year. I haven't swam once.
Was that the Memphis race?
That was the Memphis race, the one in the monsoon. But I think I haven't swam once. I maybe biked 2 or 3 times. I probably run 5 times, right? So I've really cut it all out.
But tell us about the monsoon race.
Yeah, I remember talking to you a little bit about it, and you said you were just miserable, right? It was just the weather conditions were terrible, right?
Yeah, it was. I think it was a lot of things, right? Yeah. The conditions were awful, right? And I had already had thoughts crept into my mind about how much longer do I want to do this, right? And then we got there, right? And it was a downpour from the start. I mean, the transition area was grass. It was mud, right? I looked like I just finished a Tough Mudder, right? Not a triathlon when it was done. It was a downpour. You couldn't see anything, right, on the bike, or you couldn't see more than 10 feet in front of you. It was pouring. And I was lucky of all the years I raced. I think it was only one other time it rained, right, during a race, right? So I got lucky, but it was just an awful, awful experience, right? It wasn't fun, right? And I got on the bike, and I remember saying to myself halfway through the bike, right, I said I'm done, right? Like we talked about before, like have you ever had a moment, right? And I think this is where I started. That's where I really crept into mind, is like the negative thoughts, right? And there's nothing beneficial about that in a race, right? You gotta stay positive, and you gotta, like, again, it's amazing what your mind can do for your body, right? And when you perform. But I started saying I'm done, right? Like I was a lot, like, again, I had just been hit by, I was in here getting, aid from John. I had just gotten hit by a car a couple months before, right? So I was still in a lot of pain from that, right? The weather sucked, right? And I just said, forget this. But I said, the one thing I'll take out of that race was, as bad as the weather was, as miserable as the bike was, I got on the run. I had the best run of my life, right? Because I said I loved running, and that's where I got into my, I don't know, good mind frame or mindset, right? Is where I was always at my best. So
it's your happy place.
Yeah, it is certainly my happy place. So I had a really great run, but I said I had decided. I mean, I think I decided the day after that, right? I didn't get it too quick, right? I think I wasn't too impulsive, right? I gave it. I think that race was a Saturday. I think I gave it till Monday, right? And then I decided, right, like that.
That was it.
That's it, right? I said I don't know how much longer I really want to do this, right? Because just too much of a commitment anymore.
I remember scrolling through like Facebook Marketplace, and I saw this black Trek tribe. I was like, this thing is beautiful, and I'm like reading all the specs and details, and then I saw it was your name. I was like, oh my gosh, is he, like, what's going on?
Yeah, I didn't realize how much that would. I said I was dumb on my part. That's before anyone really knew, right? And I'm like, again, because you want to I was thinking about getting rid of some of that stuff. That was probably a couple weeks after the race. I'm like, if I'm going to really do this, right, I got no need for this bike I have anymore. And I posted it on like Facebook Marketplace, and the amount of texts or calls that I got, like, what are you doing? You just got that bike, right? Like, and I said, I created a storm that I didn't want to create. I should have handled that one better. So,
So did you end up selling it, or?
I did.
You did.
I said, I got a good time for me, right? I said the bike market with COVID and everything, right? I had people like real quick. Sold it real fast. And
so you said you cycled though the other day, or you have cycled?
No, like 3 times in the last year.
So you still have a bike? I
have my road bike. Yeah, okay. I never got rid of it. So I haven't gotten on it, I said, probably twice or 3 times, but I do still have it.
And what are your thoughts now, a year out, about, structure and being that kind of person and doing it? Are you just going back to that show up late for tennis practice so I don't have to
No.
run? Or do you need another structure?
No,
to do
I'm still,
something?
again, everything in my life is pretty structured, right? As I got later in life, I said, I still, again, all the discipline I had with the eating habits and all that stuff, right? Still very structured there. I picked up weightlifting again, right? I had done a little bit of it before I got into, endurance sports and triathlon and everything like that. And I said back, weightlifting regularly, trying to put some mass on, right? Because again, I told you I was so conscious of weight and being small for triathlon that I try to do that. I'm gotten passionate about that again and doing that 5-6 days a week. So still pretty structured.
What do you weigh now, and what was your lowest race weight?
I raced at about 150 or somewhere around there, right? Low
How tall are you?
150s.
Yeah, we need a height.
5'11".
You guys are
Is
a
it-
rough crowd. Damn.
No, I just want
Context.
Yeah.
I'd like to say 6 foot, but 5'11 and a half.
Okay.
So
Now
we're
you can
about the
round
same,
up. That's
we're
fine.
about the same height. I'm
Yeah.
5'11", 3/4.
Okay.
But I said I'm at about like 180, so on a good day.
Dude, and I said I put on 25 pounds since I stopped racing. So, yeah, it's quite a bit, right? And
Yeah.
I think too, back to what I was saying before, I think that I didn't find the right balance. I think everyone wants to get so caught up in weight, right?
Mhm.
Everyone wants to talk about that, right? But there's going to be a point where you get too light, right?
Mhm.
Where you're not strong enough to
You talked
to
about that
perform.
once too. I think.
Yeah, I had a similar kind of thing. I'm a much bigger guy than you two,
Yeah,
but
but you said
but
the
yeah,
same.
I raced bikes back in the early 2000s, and I got down. I'm 6'2", and I got down to like low 170, or no, I'm sorry, like 177 or so, and couldn't put any power into the pedals. And then I put on 6 pounds and then gained 30 watts FTP in about a month and a half.
And that's the lesson I wish I would have learned. I talked about the benefits of the strength training, right, and being a little bit heavier and putting on some more muscle, right. That's where I wish I think I do think I would have performed a little better.
Yeah, that's
Heavier
what
than that.
Greg and I are going after.
Clydesdale.
No, beefcakes.
Beefcake.
We're rebranding.
Putting
it.
on the wattage.
Yeah. So I mean, were those all the questions we had, like about his career and stuff? There was a couple other ones that were really kind of interesting that I think we wanted to get into. So I don't know if you read the New York Times, but the Times put out an article a couple of weeks ago about this program in Ironman called the XC program, and it's for the 1%. They pay what were the numbers, like 10 to 15,000
5. Yeah.
to enter an Ironman event. They get white glove service. It's like Ironman rolls out the red carpet for these people. It's absolutely amazing. What does Ironman do for the pros? When you call up, or can you walk us through what's the process like? Do you pay to register for an Ironman event as a pro?
You pay you pay a yearly. You could pay per race if you want to, right? But you can also pay like a yearly, like whatever you want to call it, subscription that you can enter as many
to
races
Ironman,
as you
or
want.
is that just
That's to Ironman. So
Okay.
you still pay the USA Triathlon
Yeah.
yearly
Mhm.
thing. That's not expensive,
Mhm.
$50 or something like that. But you do pay a yearly fee to enter Ironman races,
many
even as a
races.
pro. But you can go as many. You can pay single race fees, which is
Mhm.
I think it's a little bit less than what
What an age grouper
an
would pay.
age grouper would pay.
Okay.
But you can also just pay for the year, and I think it pays itself off in like 3 races or something like that. So if you're going to
Okay.
race 3 Ironman races in a year, it just made sense to do.
And
that.
then you get on site. What's that look like? Are they helping you get there?
no.
Hotels,
Hotels?
transportation,
No.
transition.
They used to do this program, right? And again, I think a lot changed during COVID, right? I think things changed. Again, I didn't race pro beforehand, so I don't know. They used to have a program where you would apply because they would reach out to local people for
Like a homestay.
like a homestay. Exactly
Okay.
what I was looking for, right? They used to. I was
Mhm.
never able to do that, and I don't think they did that, right? Everyone was so
Mhm.
worried about that stuff, so none of that, right? But I would argue that it didn't cost me any less, right? They didn't do a whole lot, right? I
Mhm.
said they didn't nothing for transportation, nothing for
Yeah.
any type of lodging, anything like that. So not
So
a whole
it's
lot.
Not a whole lot different, huh?
So like completely self-supported.
Yep.
Wow.
If you could change anything about that, what would be your like change thing? One thing that you would wanted as a pro.
No COVID, probably. That'd be-
As a pro, what would you have
As
wanted
how Ironman's run.
from Ironman? What would you have said? Can you give us one thing? What would it be?
Anything to reduce the cost, right? Whether they put us up in a hotel somewhere near the race, right? Can organize transportation things, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not, again, not only do you not make any money, and it's an expensive sport, right? Even there's a lot of good pros that are just breaking even, right? So I would say anything to reduce the cost on the athletes would be super beneficial, right? Because you can imagine staying a weekend, right? What that's going to cost, right? And then you got to fly to wherever you're going, right? If they can, again, do something like it sounds crazy, maybe, but do something with an airlines, right? To get us there, right? To put us up in a hotel somewhere, just do something, right? And I feel like all they did was cut money at the end, right? Like it was just, not only was what they were giving, right, was being reduced, right, but they're also taking away the money from the prize purses. So, and they offered way less pro races a year, right? That was probably my biggest frustration, is you had no choices, right? And again, I don't know if, actually that's not true. I know it didn't have anything to do with COVID, right? Because they were still running the amateur races,
right,
but races that are
there.
traditionally also have a pro field, because they didn't want to pay, right? They just cut the pro field out of it, right? So I had so few options that one year that I did it of races to do that were reasonable, right? Other than I could fly to Europe, I can go fly somewhere else. But in terms of races in the US, right, you had very few choices over the course of the year.
I won't say I know a lot about like the triathlon world and whatever, but there was that video from Lionel Sanders that just came out. It's 2022 year in review. And even he said he lost money this year on races, like in terms of what he spent, he lost money. But I guess he makes it up on his YouTube channel, but just on racing, whatever he spent was a loss.
And I know you said you didn't look into any sponsorships, right?
Not really. I didn't put enough effort into it, really, to be honest, right? I never really pursued it, right? Why, I don't know, right? Because I thought it was going to be mostly, again, at my level of what I was able to do, at least in my mind, was going to be more around here's some free stuff, right? And great, but I was looking for more of anything to reduce my cost, right? And I just didn't think that was likely, so I just said forget about it.
All your gear, swimsuit, bike, shoes, everything was out of your own.
Everything was out of my own. Yep.
James, you found an interesting post on Reddit that I think Aaron can give some good insights into.
So yeah, there was I saw, just scrolling through Reddit. I'm on our triathlon, and so someone titled a post, "Could I become a pro triathlete?" So basically, there's probably tons of people out there that are having success. This person wrote, "Okay, it's a question I've been wondering. No matter what I love this sport."
James, did you read this before you decided to ask this?
Well,
Here we go.
He just sent it to us.
I made it smaller for this, and I'll keep doing it for that reason. But would it be cool to get a pro card and compete at a high level? Anyway, here's a little background about me. So basically, this guy is a 19-year-old triathlete, started a year ago, has a large age group swim background, can comfortably swim a 27-minute 70.3 swim. FTP is 242 at 143 pounds. Best triathlon run was Olympic distance. Ran a 40.22 or 40-minute 22-second 10K. Running and swimming feel like they come very natural to me, and the bike is for sure my weakest link. In terms of natural progression, what sort of benchmarks would I have to reach to be in contention of getting a pro card, and how does one even go about doing that? So if you were to talk to this guy, this 19-year-old kid, what advice would you give him?
Tell him to listen to the podcast.
How naive is he?
Yeah.
Well, did you read the comments in the?
Yeah, it's again. A lot of those numbers seem low, right? I said again, but he's 19 at the same time,
He's so
right?
young.
I said I think he's very young, right? I do think it's a sport that the number of hours, endurance sports, right? You put the hours into it and you train, right? And you have a structured program. Can you get better? Can anyone become a pro? Like he makes it seem so easy. I don't think so, right? I think there's a lot of, again, I think people are naturally gifted running. Some people are naturally gifted swimming, right? Like I think there's some like gifts to it too, like any sport, right? I think you see these NFL guys, NBA guys are super athletically gifted. So again, I think the numbers are low. I could tell you he's not going to compete in the pro field with those numbers. I can tell you that much. But again, if he wants to put the, what's the harm in putting in some, the time, many years of it and seeing where he can go. But it's very hard to answer specific numbers it's going to take this power at this weight to be a pro, right? It's, I think everyone's super secretive about what their numbers are too, that there's nothing really out there, right? For the most part. I could tell you, I don't know, can't do that math that fast. I don't know what that run is, what a 40-22 comes out to per mile, but that's
for what
for
distance?
A 10K?
For a 10K.
For a 10K.
That's not
4 minutes per K, so I can't do the math from per K to per mile. It's
6
I don't
and
think
It's
change.
a
that's-
20-minute 5K.
Yeah,
It's like
that's
6
not,
and
So,
change. on
yeah.
the
that's
mile.
not that.
6:30.
Yeah, so I think you got to get fat.
You gotta
You
get
gotta get
fast.
faster.
You got to run a little more.
Yeah, that's not that good.
But no, I think it's some kid talking, right? And I again,
Like
But-
you said, I think when you're starting young, like you should just have fun. Like you should go for a while, have some fun, enjoy the race. Like he's already thinking about trying to make it his
He's so
job.
young.
Almost like it's you don't
hey,
want
and
to
if
ruin
he
it,
wants to
right?
have the aspirations, he wants to do that, go right ahead, right?
Yeah.
I'd recommend enjoying it for a few years first. See if you like the sport, right? First, you know what I mean? Because again, you're not going to make, if anyone thinks there's anything glamorous, right? For the most part of being a pro triathlete, they're crazy, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's cool to be able to say that you do that, and you compete
Sure.
at that level, right? But there's nothing glamorous about it. I would tell them, go enjoy the sport for a couple years, right? See if you get better, right? See if there's that natural progression as you put in the hours, right? And if you enjoy it, then shoot for it, right?
Mm.
You know, and go for it. But I see a lot of crazy things on Reddit.
For sure. So, Aaron, we want to thank you a ton for spending some time with us. We got one last question that I really want to get an answer to, and then we're going to let you go. Do you miss what, if anything, do you miss about triathlon or any aspect of it at all that you miss?
I mean, I still see. Yes, there's parts I miss, right? Again, it was such a large part of my life, right? There's still things I miss, right? I see, I love the racing, right? I love the friendships I made, right? Like, again, I probably don't know any of you, right? If it wasn't for triathlon, right? I met John, we talked about, right? I made a lot of, my coach Amy, great, I said a lot of people that I met that I wouldn't have known otherwise. But, and again, obviously I see a lot of people that still race, posting stuff about events, right? Especially the big events, right?
Yep.
Like, Amateur Worlds is one of my favorite things I ever did, right? And you see people out doing things like that, right? You miss it a little bit, right? And then I think back to myself, right? I just don't miss the effort, the time that I had to put in to compete at that level, right?
Yeah.
So my time had come. And again, I say that, but the training shifted from fun and a passion to a job, right? And that's the shift that made me decide that I couldn't do this anymore. But I miss racing, right? I miss the atmosphere, the friendships I made, right? And just being in that environment all the time, right? What was very enjoyable. But again, those friendships last for a long time, right? Those aren't going anywhere. But the race day and all that stuff, who knows? Maybe late in life people get back to it. But I said, I'm probably not going to be anytime soon.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions?
We
for him?
do have some
We
rapid
have
fire
other
questions.
questions. Yeah.
Rapid fire? You want to do rapid fire now, or do you want to do rapid fire as a separate? Let's do rapid fire now. You go okay with that, Aaron?
Let's go for it.
Okay. So
Go
we're just
around.
going to go.
They're really hard questions.
They're
All
really
right.
hard. We're going to go around in a circle.
Okay.
These are
I
rapid
need my
fire. Don't think too
glasses.
much about them. Yeah, put your glasses on,
Okay, so
Marilyn.
these like
Yeah,
one word
'cause I
answers,
can't
or we
see.
want to?
Yeah.
They might need a little bit more
Might need
than
a
one
little
word.
more.
Just
Alright.
choose something.
But don't think too much about them.
All right.
All right, lead us off, Marilyn.
Marilyn, go ahead.
Of course.
That's her favorite question.
Boys. Would you rather wear Speedos or jammers?
That's
Oh,
not the
no,
question.
that's
No,
not how
no,
it's written.
no.
Would you rather wear Speedos that are too small or jammers that are too big?
Oh. I'm not,
There
no.
is no right answer to this.
I guess jammers are too big. I was never a Speedo guy, right? I think you got to be a good swimmer to pull off Speedos.
You have to go
Thank
back and
you.
listen to the Dr. John episode because
Yeah.
there is maybe the best
There's a
Dr.
good
John story.
I think funny story about Dr. John got kicked out of Lifetime for wearing a Speedo one time.
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
Yep, that came up.
I still want
He
to know
didn't say-
if that
He said like
lifeguard
24-hour
was.
fitness, but
He
it's
didn't say
probably
where.
Lifetime
He
also.
didn't say where.
Oh, he didn't say where?
I think it
He
was
didn't say
Lifetime.
where.
I remember telling him, he'd tell me he got kicked out
I want to
somewhere
know
for
if the manager and the lifeguard were female or male. I
I don't know.
wanted to.
Yeah.
He didn't say where, but now we know.
Now we know.
Yes.
All right. Favorite flavor ice cream?
chocolate.
Favorite flavor of energy gel? Is it the unflavored Morton's gel?
That's my own.
Energy gel was the SIS pineapple gels.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
James is a big
I've
fan of
just
those.
discovered that. It's delicious. No
Fantastic.
one else. I gave away a couple. No one.
I was okay with it.
No,
It wasn't-
I didn't
you
get
said
one.
pineapple. I thought like it was going to be way more pineapple.
Well, I feel like there's not a lot of pineapple out there, and that was
Yeah.
good.
Greg thought it was
He
an
just
actual
said it
pineapple.
didn't taste like pineapple.
All right. So, would you rather be invisible or be able to fly?
Invisible.
Interesting.
Post race food. You guys make it limited. Let
No,
him
yeah,
pick.
get rid of that. Just say put.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What's your favorite post race food?
Probably pizza.
not on your list, Rich.
I know.
Say,
Would you rather swim in a pool full of Nutella
who
or
came
a
up
pool
with
full
this
of
one?
maple syrup?
Nutella.
Yeah.
I don't know where this one came from.
That's much thicker.
It would make me much. I don't need to be any slower. I think that would slow me down a lot, though.
I don't know where this one came from. Would you rather be 11 feet tall or 11 inches tall?
11 feet tall. I think I'd be a great swimmer at 11 feet tall, though.
You would, but it'd be so hard to get around.
Yeah.
I mean,
Running
11
would
inches.
running would be really hard.
yeah. Would you rather fight 1 million ant-sized bulls or one bull-sized ant?
Ant size. Well, how many was it?
A million.
A million
A million.
I don't
ant-sized
think I can
bulls
appreciate what a million is, but I'm
or
thinking
one bull-sized ant.
I think
Oh.
I don't think I'm. A million ant-sized bulls.
That's the only right answer.
Yeah.
A bull-sized ant is scary as hell. I grew up watching Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, man. I still can picture that ant. Yeah, right answer. Good job.
If you could only do one exercise, what would it be?
For the rest of your life, one exercise. You
Wait,
get to pick one thing.
One thing.
like is weightlifting in general, like one
Sure.
exercise? Does that count?
I don't know. That
Uh,
seems
Is it
too
one
broad.
sport or one
Are you going
exercise?
to
It says one
limit it? Who wrote
exercise.
this? Are you going to limit it to
James.
one
This has
specific?
got to be James.
Oh, so that doesn't count? So it's got to be something else?
I don't know.
I'm
You
gonna
wrote
pick-
the question, James.
I like running, then I
Yeah.
pick running if it has to be
That's
something
fine, yeah.
specific.
Yeah, that's
definitely
one
be
thing.
running.
Running.
Okay.
Your true passion.
Would you rather be able to speak all languages or speak to animals?
All languages.
All languages.
Nobody.
No.
Oh,
No doubt.
No.
I'm totally with the animals. I don't like people.
You and
enough.
what was it?
I don't know if we need the why, but rim brake or disc brake?
Disc brake.
Mm.
And well, just tell people why.
I said my last bike was disc brake. I said that it was phenomenal. The stopping power, right? You don't have to worry in the rain, right? Disc brakes in the rain,
Yeah.
where it could be really sketchy, right? I said
Mm.
disc brakes all the way.
John is still holding on to that rim brake technology. I think just for
doesn't
the
like
weight
change,
savings.
I think.
just the weight savings, he said. But
But I'll
Yeah.
tell you something. What I read though is you actually can gain more going into corners because you can think about it when you're turning. You can dive deeper in before
Mhm.
you start slowing down. That you actually could save more with that than you do with the weight. You
Yeah.
know, and the other advantage. So, but I'm definitely a disc brake person.
so choose between these two scenarios. Would you rather every month compete in the triathlon, and this is now, or get a
Do
root
we-
canal
Can we give him a distance
every month?
of
Yeah, you gotta
triathlon?
give me a distance on that. Sprint
70.3. Let's go
Yeah,
70.3.
Yeah.
sprint's too easy.
every month.
So
Or,
Or
a
get a
root
root
canal.
canal.
I mean, a
every
limit.
every month.
Or
A root canal every month too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
I'm
one of
going
those
back
two.
to it.
Or one of the
One of
I know.
those
I'm
two.
doing the 70.3 every month.
Yeah.
I'll go back
Yeah.
to it.
So you
How
are-
about-
so
what
you
about
are
Iron
making-
Man
so-
every month?
we got it here first. He is making a comeback.
Does it change if we make it an Ironman, full Ironman?
Every
distance.
month. That's
Every
a
month?
lot. For how
For the rest of my
long?
life?
Or until you run out of teeth for root canal.
I guess I'm doing an Ironman every month.
You got
Heard
32
it
teeth,
here
right?
first, guys.
Would you rather run a 5K as fast as possible or an easy pace marathon?
5K as fast as I can.
Ugh.
Oh, mm.
Like
I
cough
mean,
out your lung.
that would be really
want
fast
it.
for him. It would be done.
Well, yeah, is it one
It
time?
would be
Yeah,
like,
you still
I meant-
taste blood, though.
like I just meant as like run it so it's so painful. Like
I'll do that. If I'm
Versus
running, I
just-
want to do that. I said I wouldn't mind my marathon being painful. I don't want to. I
Wow.
want it to be terrible.
so would you rather run a 5K as fast as possible or a marathon as fast as possible?
well, he's going to try to run both
Duh,
as fast
why
as
would he want-
possible. Like,
Well, then does the distance
Marathon takes more time.
I would pick a.
No kidding.
I think I'd pick a marathon
favorite
Ooh.
distance. Let's just go there.
for
For
run
run.
distance.
Yeah.
The half marathon I really liked. I think
Okay.
it was long enough, right? I said marathon got long, right? I only did it once or twice. Some of my training runs were longer, but I think the half marathon distance was not too short, not too long. Was
just
the
right?
sweet spot.
Yeah.
Awesome. Aaron,
That was it. You survived.
you survived
Yeah,
rapid fire.
you did it.
Thanks a ton, man. We really appreciate you taking the time, and hope everybody out there can learn something from this. Anybody else have something for Aaron?
Just want to thank him for being
Yep,
on the
yeah.
next level
Appreciate
quad
it.
pod.
Yeah. it was really good.
Oh my
Pleasure to be on the quad pod.
All right,
It's
so I guess that
sticking.
makes it official. Quad pod. All right, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll be back next year with our next episode. Take care, everybody, and have a great New Year's. Bye. Thank you again for listening to the Team Next Level Coaches Roundtable. We love bringing you content that we think will help you with your athletic journey, whatever that may be. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave a review, drop us a 5-star rating in whatever podcast app you like to use, or leave us a comment about things you'd like to hear in the future. If you'd like to learn more about Team Next Level and all we offer, please go check out our website, goteamnltry.com. That's goteamnltry.com. There, you can find out about all the things we offer, such as our training squad for people in the northern New Jersey area, one-on-one coaching options for both local and remote athletes, as well as more useful content for those of you just looking to learn a little bit more about us. Remember, that's goteamnltry.com. Thank you again for giving us a listen, and for myself and all the coaches, we can't thank you enough for listening to our podcast and spending some time with us.